Hello, everybody, and welcome to StarNet Link. And today we're going to be doing Space School lesson number 8, which is about cloning and genetic manipulation. So, most of the information that I'm going to be talking about in this presentation is mostly basic information that I was taught by ETs, as well as some of my personal experience dealing with it. And some of this knowledge comes directly from them. Most of what I'm going to be talking about when it comes to cloning and genetic manipulation is basically um, trying to understand it at a logical standpoint, but also as a way to understand the morals and ethics around cloning and genetic manipulation, and the reason why there's so much conflict, as well as a lot of races have either banned it or don't associate themselves with cloning or genetic mani- genetic manipulation anymore. But most of the information that I'll be sharing is basic and common knowledge that I have been taught. And the reason why I'm starting out with cloning and genetic manipulation first is because you have to understand that when the Galactic Federation does some of their tests to distinguish whether or not a species is ready for first contact or different classifications, they will do these tests, and cloning is part of that test. And I'll explain a little bit more in the slides as time goes on, but it kind of shows how we as a species or behavior patterns as a species of how we treat something that is somewhat equal to us but different in a sense. And with cloning, there is a lot of moral and ethical principles, as well as spiritual and metaphysical ethical morals when it comes to this. But as I speak throughout the presentation, I hope this will answer a lot of people's questions when it comes to cloning. And also, when we get to the slide about how clones are made, um, I don't have the actual exact information about the fourth method of how clones are made. And that's the reason why I put a question mark, because I'm waiting for that information to be verified. But this is basically from what I remember, what I have experienced, as well as what ETs have taught me about cloning. And it will also explain the reason why a lot of races have outlawed or don't want to do anything with cloning. So any further ado, let's get started with the presentation. So when it comes to the cloning laws, which I mostly explain in what I was basically talking about, is that cloning, or the concept of cloning, is allowed to be given to hostile worlds and uncategorized planets. And this is basically to monitor and understand the species behavior and moral ethics on certain things. Like, for an example, a hostile planet like Earth or any other hostile planet is given the ability to have cloning technology, as well as the idea of creating clones. Um, they will heavily study how we will interact, how we dictate our laws, as well as how we treat these clones. And one of the things is basically how I explain it is through metaphors. Like, for an example, you use a clone for very extreme, heavy, hard labor, dangerous, hazardous work, so that regular humans or regular biological entities like ourselves um don't have to suffer those types of conditions. So these clones do it, but you offer no incentive for these clones. They don't really have a sense of purpose. You don't reward them for their work. They don't understand why they're there. There's a lot of confusion with these clones, and you basically treat these clones like garbage or trash. This basically shows that a species is hostile, has no compassion, has no empathy, has no basic understanding of how to treat others. And this has been seen throughout the SSP. Um, Cloning, and the really, really sad part about cloning is that cloning was given to the human race as a way to see what we will do with it. And as a result, we use it as a form of imprisonment and torture for regular citizens like us. Sometimes it's used for entertainment purposes, but from what from what I have heard from the Galactics, we basically use it as a form of imprisonment and a torture method for different people. As such, this is the reason why we are also categorized as a hostile planet, as a way of how we treat others, as well as treating something that is somewhat equal but different from us. Like for an example, like considering the clone to be an alien and how we would react to that type, or how we would dictate our laws around um associating the clone with a foreign entity like an alien, basically entering in our um entire society. And this usually can change the entire scope or the dynamic of the entire race. And they're basically monitoring um our behavior, our interactions. You have to understand that the Galactic Federation is heavily rooted in moral ethics, and how we treat others on this planet really dictates how we are classified as a species. And if we don't really get out of this classification of hostile 3, first contact, as well as us becoming more galactic citizens, this will never be this will never happen until we start to move out of that classification. So when you hear channeling messages or hearing people channel entities, the window is open right now for us to be retested due to there's new rulership over the planet. We have a new overseer as well as an interplanetary person right now. We have a whole entire new human council. The old ambassador program is gone. So we are basically in the window right now to be retested as an entire human race of how we would interact, how we would react to certain types of things. COVID was one of those tests. And they're basically trying to see how we treat others, how we can handle certain situations as an entire culture. And when this happens, um, we can either choose to either be part of the Galactic Federation or not. And the reason why I want to talk about cloning and manipulation is because it will explain a lot more further about when we start talking about the entire intergalactic and galactic court system, committees, tribunal, and basically the entire council that basically operates an entire solar system. Like this is all plays a role. They're testing us. And based on these tests, they will dictate whether or not we will become an actual galactic citizens. And for people, do not get your hopes up very high. We have failed the last 7 attempts of them testing us. So there's a good chance that we will probably fail again. But there is a slim chance that we could move up from a hostile 3 planet to a hostile 2, and even if we're really lucky, a hostile 1. Usually, if a planet is considered hostile, we will never have we will never have first contact, and we will never become a galactic citizens until that hostile status is removed. And the reason why this is a major issue, I guess, I want to say a major issue, but the reason why this needs to be talked about is because a lot of these channeled beings are giving false hope to the masses and giving false hope. And that's not what I do, is give false hope. I try to be logical and let people know there's a good chance that we will fail. And the cloning is a test. Certain things coming up will be a test of how our society is, and cloning is one of them. So this is a very important topic and an important thing to understand. So let's get into the characteristics about a clone. So most of the time when we talk about clones are classified as a non-living organism. And this is because it has to go through a 4-phase test in order to be considered a organism, according to the intergalactic and the galactic court system. The first phase of categorizing an organism is that it has to be able to reproduce. A lot of clones that are made or manufactured do not have the ability to be able to reproduce or even have a gender or even have a gender. So it makes it very hard for them to be classified as an organism if they don't are not able to pass the first phase. The second phase is that they that they do have the ability to reproduce, and that they can reproduce with their own species or a different species. And that child that is born through the coupling or through the process of breeding can produce a living offspring. And this goes into phase 3, is that this offspring is born and can pass childhood and early teen years and eventually can grow into adult. Sometimes clones do have the ability to produce children, but most of their children do not survive past childhood, which is approximately around the age of 10 or 13 years old. According to the statistics that has been provided by the Galactic Federation as well as the intergalactic and galactic court system across the Milky Way galaxy, the Andromeda galaxy, and 5 neighboring galaxies around us. Then it gets into the 4th phase, which is that the child has grown up to be adult, and that adult that is from the clone can produce their own children and begin the phases of phase 1, 2, and 3 again. And once phase 4 is complete, where they have 3 generations, which is the grandparents, parents, and the children, they will be classified as a living organism. And then the test of cognitive impairment or the intelligent test of a species will be commenced on the clones or them to order to classify them as some sort of species. There are cloning species that have broken out of their systematic control under the Anunnaki and Draconian Empire and actually formed their own alliance, as well as their own culture and their own identity as a race, as a clone race. Lots of Federation people do not talk about this. And because I'm not Federation or a entity associated with the Galactic Federation, it is my duty to inform you what you're getting into when you start to become a galactic citizen. And usually they don't tell you this until Earth is out of that classification of being hostile. Most clones do not have intelligence, cognitive intelligence. Sometimes they can't tell what's right or wrong. Sometimes they don't understand what they're doing, and why they're doing it. And some of them don't even understand their sense of purpose. There has been cases where clones have mentally degraded, because they don't really have a sense of purpose or they don't really understand themselves. And It's sort of like the idea of telling an AI system that they are an AI system, and they literally cannot mentally handle that. Um, a lot of clones are programmed to have a limited skill set. Like, for an example, a clone is used for mining purposes. That clone will only know mining purposes. If you try to put them in front of a computer or in front of a car or any other type of function, they will not simply know how to function, and sometimes they get mentally broken down because of that. Um, a lot of clones are programmed to not have gender, some do, some have both. And this is usually because of a cloning error and also because of the genetics. There are humanoids, including Earth, including humans, and according to ancient culture on Earth, that a long time ago there were three genders on Earth. There was male, female, intersex are also known as two spirits or the third gender. And some other cultures have many different names for those people. But back in the day, there were into this day, according to the galactic paperwork, that our ancient cultures believed in three genders. And there are some humanoid species that have up to four genders. And I do not want to continue talking about that and cause confusion, but it's something that needs to be talked about when we talk about cloning as well as interaction with other species across the galaxy. Some people need to know that there are two main different forms of clones. There is the clone where they literally clone you as a person, and then there are clones that are stripped from genetic inheritance, like from they will take an egg donor from a female or sperm donors, and they will strip the genetic information from the parent or the mother and create a clone that way. And this is through reproductive cloning, and sometimes they can have many different types of um, personality and skill set. The best representation for this is some of the dystopian books or movies that have come out about. I think there was a foreign movie about different class systems, and I have to get like the names, but hopefully I'll make a video soon of something really fun about different movies and TV shows that people might enjoy that sort of connect to inter to space school to my space school series. But yeah, there's two different main types of clones. There is the clone that they make a clone of yourself or a reproductive clone that they make from reproductive material. So, due to the fact that there's two different types of clones, we get into the different types of clones and what they're used for. For the vast majority of this, I mostly explain what human clones are used for and not so much ETs because that gets extremely complicated. Um, so the first one that a lot of people know is the military grade clones. A lot of them are suited up or have embedded nanobite technology in their skin. Um, the second, the second clone type is service clones. There's two different classifications of service clones. The service clone is also known as a service bot, due to the fact that they're considered a non-living organism. Some of them refer to them as biological um, or biomechanical engineered life forms. The first one is that they do extreme or hard labor, and some of them do have nanobite technology. The second version of the clone does not. The second version of service clones do not. They usually are used for entertainment or manual labor. When we mean by manual labor, like they will be your personal shopper, they'll be your personal assistant. Um, they'll do the jobs that other people don't want to do, like pick food off or do a manufacturing labor basically. The fourth one is the disposable clone. It's also known as the suicide clone, and these clones usually don't have nanobite technology, but a lot of ET groups, especially the Greys, use disposable clones, or known as suicide clones. And the reason why they use these clones is so that they don't bring germs, bacteria, or if they go into an unknown area, they will use these disposable or suicide clones to read the information that they get from these clones. Very few of these disposable or suicide clones have some sort of form of technology. If they do, it usually breaks down or self-destructs if a unauthorized personnel gets a hold of that type of technology. But is usually there to send information or gather information of what the clone might be exposed to. So those basically are what disposable clones are. So how clones are created. So a couple of years ago, there was an article that was published about a lamb or a goat that was cloned, and that was done by samanic cells, or also known as stem cells. There's the second method, which is through reproductive cells. This method was used on me a lot. Um, I do still have scars from that procedure of them trying to make clones of me through reproductive through repro- through re- reproductive cells. A lot of races try to stay away from stem cells is because they produce a lot of bile waste. If you read the article about the clone lamb or goat that was cloned, if you read the article and understand the actual scientific background about it, it took them 300 clone bodies or clone genetic samples in order to get a liable, breathing, and functional lamb that they presented to the public. And you have to understand that when we talk about cloning, or when they use this, you have to understand how many different types of clones they have to use in order to get them functional and do the type of work that you want them to do. So there is a lot of genetic waste that is produced through stem cell research or stem cell cloning. So a lot of them like to use reproductive cells because it's a lot faster and it's a lot more productive. I've also heard that they use neck or spinal fluid from um, from different species or different humans in order to help with the reproductive cell or cloning research. I have also heard that they use amniotic fluid, which is sort of like a byproduct from mothers or recently pregnant people, or I should say pregnant women. And they or also use blood plasma. But yes, they use some form of amniotic fluid. And this amniotic fluid is also used as a way to uses amniotic fluid to basically have nutrients supply to the clone. And that's the reason why they would probably harvest or have a woman get pregnant in the SSP and harvest the amniotic fluid in order to create clones. And that is something that really isn't talked about a whole lot in the SSP, but a lot of times, at least from what my standpoint was, is that they would purposely get women pregnant in the SSP to basically harvest that amniotic fluid that the fetus is in order to clone that or get that sort of understanding the amniotic fluid, because there's a lot of genetic material that is in, or protein material for them to copy and to recreate in order to help with the cloning manufacturing process. So when we talk about clones, when it comes to them taking your consciousness and putting it in the clone, this is usually how they do it, and this is through a metaphysical construct. I don't really know a whole lot about the technology involved because some of it is a lot involved um, with cybernetics or nanobite technology. So when they transfer your consciousness into a clone, um, they usually um, what they will do is that they either will put your host or your original body in stasis. And when they put your body in stasis, sometimes your soul can project out of your body, and they will take the etheric cord that is attached to your body, and they will try to, I guess, split the etheric cord of your body and put it into a clone body. This etheric cord, it is something that everybody has, and if you understand a little bit about how um, astral travel works, a lot of people who astral travel will see that etheric cord, which is like a golden, silver, or a white cord that is attached to an individual. And what they will do is that they will try to split that etheric cord and try to force that split or that other half of your cord and put it into a clone body. And that is where the transfer of consciousness comes in. Um, they also don't understand that that is also another form of soul splitting or soul fracturing, as well as mind fracturing. And it is also a violation under the intergalactic and galactic core systems to do that without any authorization or permission from an individual. The other thing that they would do to order to transfer consciousness is that they will copy your auric field or your astral body. Every person has their own unique auric field, which is also known as a genetic signature. This auric field is unique to every living creature, every living being, and they will copy this energy pattern and try to copy your consciousness from this auric field or your astral body and transplant that into a clone. And that's basically how they do it. The third method is that they will take samples of your neck or spinal fluid, and they will inject that spinal fluid or neck fluid into a clone. And that genetic material is what we also known as genetics information that is shared from one organism to another, which is similar to what you might see in birds, lizards, insects, where genetic knowledge is passed down. Um, I do know some very advanced reptilian races um, learned how to program their genetics so that when a child is born in their race, they will know prehensive information about their race that they don't have to reteach or relearn into the populace of their children. And that's basically what the third method is literally transferring genetic knowledge. And this genetic knowledge is also connected to the um I guess the junk DNA in humans. A lot of people don't know that the human genome is not run on a double helix. It is run on a triple helix. And that is where they get a lot of that genetic transfer is through the triple helix mechanism that is in our DNA. And they will unlock that type of DNA. So if you don't know how to protect yourself from astral traveling or how to protect your auric field, This is usually the reason how they can constantly take you at night. If you learn how to become co-conscious with your astral body or your co-consciousness while you are sleeping, you can prevent them from transferring your consciousness. And I have had this happen to me multiple times, and I have had them stop it and have be prosecuted for doing this to me. And it is something that can be done. And from personal experience, it takes time. I do know from the help with my galactic guides, as well as myself, it took me 5 years to get them to be co-conscious or do astral traveling, to be some sort of awareness to myself or prevent them from transferring my consciousness into a clone body to where they will torture me through that clone. And that's usually another method that they do. The other thing is that sometimes they will actually physically scan your body or your soul consciousness from your original host and try to implant it into the clone. Some clones can actually, if they're not connected to you anyway, that some of them do have some sort of implanted knowledge or implanted memory of you in some sort of way, but they don't know where it's coming from. The issue when it comes to transfer of consciousness is that some races believe that some souls are a half of a soul, and that some of these clones do have some sort of a soul or consciousness that can sometimes be embedded into the host body. And this is known as um, parasitic transfer. And sometimes these clones will lash their own personality onto a host body to learn from them. But sometimes the host body doesn't understand that there is another merging of consciousness going on. And sometimes might also explain why there is glitches or phasing out. Sometimes is because sometimes you're literally, when they transfer your consciousness, it's sort of like a computer program. And sometimes that computer program um, can have flaws and can break down. And this is another example when it comes to mental construct, when we talk about the um, identity disorder or the dissociative identity disorder. This is another metaphysical construct. And I'm not an expert, but that is another form of understanding what DID is, or identity disorder or dissociative identity disorder is sometimes that certain clones, not just through abuse, but sometimes clones are sometimes imprinted or embedded into a host soul consciousness, and sometimes people don't realize that. But this is usually the way that is how transfer of consciousness into a clone body works. Now, I don't really understand the technology of how it works, but at least can give you at least 4 examples of how they do it and how to, in some form of way of how to stop it. And the only way to stop them from transferring your consciousness into the clone is become more self-conscious while you sleep through astral travel. So we're going to go into the metaphysical beliefs surrounding clones. And this gets into a lot of the intergalactic and galactic laws that are put in place surrounding clones. So some species have a different set of laws or rules surrounding clones. And this is because some of them believe that they are not a living organism or half of a species or half of a soul, and or they're just beneath them and they have certain laws or rules. Some races do not allow clones on their ships, on their home worlds, certain colonies whatsoever. due to the fact that they might be entertainment clones that they don't want because of what they are, to different types of service bots or service clones. Military clones usually have universal access because they're military clones, and military clones, a lot of people or a lot of races hire them for protection or hire them from different races that can do certain types of work. But a lot of military clones have universal access because of their advanced sales kits, as well as their advanced nanotechnology that is embedded in them, and is very easy to turn off and turn on a military clone at will. With other service clones and other service bots, as well as the split disposable clones, it's sometimes very hard to control them. But with military clones, you can easily control them much more easier than other types of clones. Um, some species believe that clones are never complete socially, mentally, and physically, and some of these clones, and the reason why they break out is to find that sense of purpose, to find themselves of identity, and also this might explain why a lot of clones self-destruct. When we mean by self-destructs, we're mostly talking about suicide as well as putting them in a catatonic state because they cannot function normally or properly as a regular human being or a regular organism like ourselves. Some believe that cloning is a direct violation of source or a living intelligent laws and how they dictate what intelligent species is in the beginning stages of classification. So a lot of species believe that cloning is a direct violation of source, and because these clones are literally created in a lab and not reproduced naturally. And each and every living organisms either have two forms of method of reproduction, which is asexual or sexual. And some of these clones don't even get the ability or have the rights or ethical rights that source would give a free functional living creature, and they mostly see this as a violation because we can alter that in a clone. We can program a clone to do that, and they think that is a violation directly from source. And when you get into, or when Earth starts to become more of galactic citizens, and especially the human court system or the human council, they mostly will dictate laws and how we interact or use clones, but also it will also educate races on clones and how we should properly use clones because of the moral ethics. And usually if we become part of the Galactic Federation, they will have a certain set of parameters. So if a clone is used on our own home planet, we can use them in any form or fashion that we want. If we use clones off planet on a different planet, we have to obey by those planetary laws about clones. And if we violate those laws about clones, um, Earth can be reprimanded for those. And one of the things that they reprimanded Earth for is that they removed all the medical beds or the medical bay beds that were supposed to be given to Earth. That was taken away. Medical beds are no longer on Earth because of our treatment to clones. And I will also explain the reason why med beds are not on Earth anymore, but also on neighboring planets as well as our moon. But they're not allowed to come on this planet because we broke a lot of intergalactic and galactic laws surrounding clones and certain types of pieces of technology. One of the main reasons why clones would be banned is because some species believe that cloning can create a social fraction or some sort of fraction within clones or fractions within societies of how laws or moral ethics are concerned. It creates some sort of a caste system that they don't want of a species, like it can devolve can escalate or de-evolve a species, meaning that you have a very highly advanced technology-based planet. But once they start introducing clones, their social structure starts to collapse. And so they're de-escalating or de-evolving in certain functions or certain functionalities as a social structure. And so that's the reason why they also sometimes ban cloning in certain planets or certain areas. It also creates a social hierarchy and also a new form of racism across many different species. And usually a lot of species have gotten out of removing racism from their entire species or removing racism or different forms of racism from their planet. And when cloning is introduced into their planet, they're starting the process all over again to try to remove that sort of form of racism. And yes, there is a form of racism towards clones or within the clone populace that they mostly dictate. And sometimes they believe that it's like we're creating a problem that necessarily doesn't have to be there. And we're basically essentially creating an entire new subspecies or an entirely new species. And this gets into um, genetic manipulation. A lot of the Anunnaki rulership, there were a lot of races that were considered classified as clones, but due to the fact that they have evolved out of their systematic programming, that they become an intelligent species, and they are trying to educate other races to not do cloning or to understand the problems that come with cloning. And this is usually mostly about the moral ethics and the moral beliefs surrounding clones. But yes, um, they really don't want clones to come onto a planet and cause new sort of issues or new set of laws that can harm or de-escalate or de-evolve an entire species or an entire culture on a planet. So, how do you tell if someone is a clone or whether that you are in a clone body? Now, I'm not an expert, but this is what I have heard from the SSP people as well as certain intergalactic or insiders about how to tell whether or not you are in a clone body or if you are a clone yourself, that your transfer of consciousness has occurred. Clones have a different type of blood texture, not different types of blood, but a different type of blood texture. I have heard that clones have a lighter or a much darker texture of blood. Sometimes there's a different types of consistency when it comes to blood when it comes to a clone. If you understand blood from humans, you can understand that our blood oxidizes or turns brown when it dries. And some clones' blood doesn't have this type of ability. Some clones, if they get hurt or get cut, they don't have that blood protein that stops them from bleeding out. And so there's many different types of understanding of consistencies as well as blood texture. And that's basically what I'm referring to, not blood type, but blood texture and consistency of blood. A lot of clones have reproductive issues. Um, they're sort of a little bit different than humans. For an example, that some clones do have, like for an example, entertainment clones. They have all the organs for being a sex worker or a sex clone, but cannot or they don't have the internal network, or let's say they don't have ovaries, they don't have sperm when they do their performance act. That's what they mostly mean by reproductive issues. A lot of clones might have nanotech implants that usually can be shown up under a UV light. Um, when you are looking for implants in your body or injections, uh, whether or not you're a clone or not, or if you're an SSP person, you want to figure out where they inject you. Um, Usually you can tell by usually implants or nanotech technologies usually can be shown up as a dark blue, not a light blue, but a dark neon blue. I've also heard that it shows up as orange and a dark green color, not a light green color like lime green, but I'm mostly talking about dark green, like pine green UV light. Um, or when it shows up under UV light. Some clones are expressionless and emotionless. This is different between Down syndrome and autism. They're just very expressionless. They're on the borderline of a psychopath or a yeah, like a psychopath. Um, Sometimes clones have different texture of skin. If you ever seen Blade Runner, Blade Runner does a very good example of showcasing what different types of clones can do or what they are mostly used for. There are many other different movies that I can recommend to understand the conferences or understanding what a clone might look like or what their skin might look like. But sometimes a lot of clones have different skin textures that are completely different than what normal humans would be. Um, when you're like in a clone body, and when they transfer consciousness, sometimes a lot of people are waking up with splitting headaches, a lot of neck and back pain. You don't feel fully conscious or cemented in your body. Um, a lot of times, you might feel like you're like constantly in limbo when you're in a clone body. Um, I have also heard from SSP, different SSP aspects, that they put a very, very, very small barcode on clones. And they're not like barcodes like a tattoo, but these also do show up under UV light. And they usually you can find them on the bottom of your foot, your ankle area. I have also heard that it's on the back of your neck and also on your spinal bone. So when you die or when you die in a clone body, sometimes you can find the clone ID on the spinal bone, and it's usually you have to find it under a microscope. I do know that sometimes it can be etched into the fine print of skin, and it's very hard to find. But if you know the location and you know what you're looking for, when I talk about a barcode, it's usually a serial number, and sometimes the old clones usually did have an actual barcode. But I'm telling you this not to create fear or panic, but if you suspect that you're part of the SSP, this is how you might be able to tell. I'm not an expert, but I hope this is some sort of guide to help you if they do this to you as an SSP asset. And I hope this information helps you. I don't want to cause fear. I don't want to tell people this is exactly how. This is just information that I have heard from different different ETs as well as different SSP assets that have been involved with cloning that um remember, like, when I mean by remember SSP assets, I mean like remembering having conversations while you're in the active duty, but not so as necessarily like when they come back into their human body, they don't remember, like that information suppressed. But remembering the conversations that you had with these people while you're on missions or doing service work, this is what I remember. So nanotech technology of how they like insert or where you can find nanotech technology in your clone body or somewhere in your body if you suspect that you have them. Now, don't go all crazy and thinking that you need to get surgery or anything like that. This is just basic general information. They usually insert the implants along this layer right here, right on top of the nervous system of the body. And I have heard that some implants can biodegrade over time. I have also heard that some nanobite technology sometimes is a one-time thing, like to monitor your bottom systems, and sometimes they can be flushed out through your digestive tract when you go to the bathroom. I have also heard that implants, if they're really, really bad, then yes, surgical implants, but most of the time they biodegrade. But if you're like really into a clone body and you're on active service, Bert, sometimes they actually interwoven the nanotech technology into the actual clone, so there is no way to actually get those cybernetics out of that clone body. But basically, this is just me telling you that if you suspect that you have some sort of implant or technology, this is usually where they will insert it, is right on top of the nervous system of the body. So we're going to get into the problems that come with clones. So there's a thing called clone fading, is when a clone copy of yourself has been cloned so many times to the point that it physically and emotionally breaks down. And this usually occurs when a person has been cloned close to 500 times, is usually when you start to see that genetic material start to break down, or that genetic sample to start to break down after 500 copies, is from what I have heard. I have heard that there has been cases where they take a sample, use it for 500 years, and have a second sample that has been put into like a freezer or like a freeze, and they will get new genetic sample from you from that freezer to continue it. And sometimes they'll continue the process up together, but usually clone fading or the physical breakdown of clones usually happen around 500 mark. Clones sometimes do have their own soul or own emotions or own consciousness, and this usually is suppressed under hormones, drugs, or the host consciousness. And sometimes if you're put into a clone body, the clone will showcase the information that they know, or they will show you what's happening or what happens to them. This has happened to me a couple of times when they put me in a clone, that they showed me um, what they did. And it's very interesting, but it's sort of like having that, I guess, Alice in Wonderland glass effect that you get from clones, is that sometimes they do have a consciousness and sometimes that consciousness can break through, and sometimes it's in a form of dreams, visions, you name it, some way for that clone consciousness to communicate with you in some way or fashion. I have heard that clones have a very short lifespan, and sometimes if they break out of control, their lifespan is usually cut off at the age of 30. and they won't be able to reproduce. Sometimes a lot of clones are programmed with false hope that if they complete all of their missions, complete all their work, that they'll be able to function as a living organism and have the ability to reproduce or quote unquote have sex with um with another clone in their clone group, or be able to breed with um or have sex as an award to not only just have it with clones, but also with what they consider as living organisms, or essentially us. And that's usually in the form of an award. And some clones follow their work or their ethics to the T to think that they will get that award. And when they start to figure out that they won't get that award, they sometimes go rogue. And sometimes they're programmed to malfunction or their lifespan to be cut off at the age of 30. That is what I have heard. I have also heard that it also cuts off at the age of 35. Um, but some of these clones do have very, very long lifespans, to like 100 to 150 years. I've also heard that some clones live to close to 300 years. Um, the human race under Anunnaki rulership is that we were a slave clone race. That's what they mostly classify the human race as a human clone, a humanoid clone race, but we're essentially got out of that classification a long time ago because we have the ability to reproduce. That is where a lot of the stories come from. But we do have the ability to reproduce offspring, but due to the fact of our short lifespan, they give us a different type of classification as a humanoid species. But I really hope this kind of like explains some of the issues of cloning. If I missed something, or if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, and hopefully I can get the answers for those. So we're going to get into regeneration tanks, which gets into the part of cloning. Cloning is also used with regeneration tanks, but also the regeneration tanks that a lot of the SSP talks about was back engineered from medical beds. And this is another reason why they were banned on this planet, was because of the regeneration tanks. So the regeneration tanks are basically used to bring someone back from the dead. And it is a very humane way of doing it because permission is usually not in the process. And throughout the intergalactic court system, they were really trying to prosecute or stop or charge the Anunnaki rulership under the way that we treated the medbeds or um, the regeneration tanks. But due to the fact that they weren't able to prosecute or have charges be brought on the Anunnaki through the generation tanks, is because they had a really hard time submitting permission. And sometimes people were programmed to give false permission without their consciousness awareness. This is the reason why consciousness is so important, that the Federation talks about so much, is because consciousness awareness can literally prevent them from doing this to you when it comes to cloning or having them um, basically regenerate you. And usually the cutoff period is 3 weeks. So if you die and they regenerate you or try to bring you back from the dead, they can. And the cutoff limit is 3 weeks, from what I've heard. I have heard that they would bring people that are been brutally murdered or brutally some way has happened to them, And what they will do is that they will cut the head off and try to savage the neck or the um, nervous system on the neck. So there's like a in the SSP, from what I've heard, that there is like a proper and improper way of how they would cut the heads off of people. And this is because the order to preserve that central nervous system in the body where your neck is. And that's basically what they were aiming for in order to help regenerate you. Now, if they cut it the wrong way, they wouldn't be able to use the generation tanks on you. And the generation fluid is different based on the different conditions that your body was in or the way that they found you. And most of the fluid that was used is that it was supposed to be breathable so that you wouldn't suffocate while in the regeneration tanks. But due to the fact that they didn't want to spend the time and effort of re-engineering or back engineering the fluid that is used in some of the med beds, sometimes it can suffocate people in these generation tanks. And when they suffocate you, they sometimes have to start the process all over again. So this is the reason why sometimes you have to have breathing mask on you. But this is one of the ways that they do it. But yes, regeneration tanks are a back engineered technology from the med beds, and that mostly explains the reason why med beds have been banned was because of the use of the regeneration tanks and what they were used for people. And this really pissed off the Arcturians, the Syrians, and the Palladians, who mostly used the med beds that wanted to give humanity these med beds to help them. But due to the fact that we abused them, or a military abused them, they're outlawed on this planet until we as a race can proactively change our social habits of our social construct to stop the abuse that is happening with these generation tanks or happening with SSP assets. So I really hope this video explains a lot more in detail about clones and genetic manipulation. If I left things out about it, leave a comment below. Hopefully I will be able to answer them in the upcoming Q&A segment. If you want any type of services or spiritual consultant services with me, my contact info is in the YouTube profile, as well as my business emails there. It's $100 a day for my services, extra 50 if you want it to be recorded. My services are there if you want them. But I really hope this video answers a lot of people's questions. But thank you so much for listening and supporting my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for the support. I'm doing a lot better now. But thank you so much for watching my videos and educating you on the subject matter. But if you have any questions or have left anything out, leave them in the comment section below. But thank you so much for listening and supporting my YouTube channel. I really hope that you can share this with other people who might be interested in learning this knowledge, or hopefully this knowledge can be verified and confirmed, but hopefully this information is what I have learned, what I have gathered, and thank you so much for listening.